Hi, and welcome to an artist talk. We are 934 Gallery. My name is Lisa Steward. I'm one of the volunteers at 934 Gallery, located in the Milo Grogan district of Columbus. Today we have Crystal Tursich with us, who has been the artist on view May and June of 2020 in the gallery. Normally our space is open and we will have our artist talks in the space, but due to the ongoing pandemic, Crystal and I are meeting virtually right now to kind of have a conversation about Crystal's work, the work that she has up in the show, and a little bit of her background as an artist as well. Crystal, you are a photographer, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'd love it if you could take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio. I actually did my BFA at Adrian College, which is a teeny tiny liberal arts college in Adrian, Michigan. I moved to Columbus in 2007. I did my master's here at CCAD, and I was part of the inaugural master's class there, so we finished in 2012. Since then, I've been teaching photography. I've taught at Ohio State and CCAD, and I teach now in the upper school at Columbus Academy. So I teach high school age students, which is kind of fun.
That's awesome. So what brought you, your BFA, was that in photography as well? Did you have a focus in photography?
My focus was really just fine arts. We had concentration, so you could choose painting or photography or ceramics or printmaking. And so my focus was photography. I started out wanting to be a painter, and then I took my first photo class and switched.
Well, I kind of want to start sliding in a little bit into your show. Currently is up at 934 Gallery. And again, people can visit 934gallery.org to see images of your show, and also your website too,
Yeah.
crystaltursich.com. I want to talk a little bit about the subject matter. I understand that might be difficult for you. This is probably difficult for some listeners. The subject matter of In Silence deals with your miscarriage.
Mhm.
Was that in 2018 or 2017?
It was in 2018. I
2018.
actually very quickly started making images afterward.
So is this your motion of making sense of it all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there were so many like moments of just this absolute silence in the beginning that was scary and overwhelming. Um, the the statement talks about being in that ultrasound room, and that was the longest, shortest amount of time I think I've ever experienced in my life. It was like everything stopped, and I was sitting there and I was kind of waiting for this tech to give me any sort of indication of anything, and she kind of gasped, and I knew what she was about to say. So it was a very silent kind of room. All you could hear was maybe like the HVAC system and her tapping keys on the keyboard before she told me that there basically was no more heartbeat. So she turned the screen to me and I looked at it. And I think I kept my composure okay while I was in there. But, I got home and I kind of just like melted to the floor. Um, so it was this like really kind of silent moment, but filled with so much kind of sorrow and sadness all at one point. Um, and then just from that point on, I mean, I think I only took like 3.5 days off of work because I couldn't stand being at home anymore. So I went back to work, and then it was really close to the end of the school year. So during the summers, I spend a lot of time at home during the day by myself. And I had these moments of silence at home where I couldn't help but just think about it and reel through what might I have done wrong, what could have gone wrong. I mean, there's a lot of questions left unanswered after something like this. If there's not, I mean, sometimes there's like a really obvious cause and there wasn't one. So it was, In Silence just felt right. It felt like this very silent moment that just spoke so loudly. It was, I think I showed these images in the beginning phases to Rick Petrie. Like director of grad studies at CCAD, and he looked at them and he said, some of these are really silent and some are so loud. And I said, well, that's how it felt. It was like silent and loud at the same time. Like it was so overwhelming to be going through this experience and feeling these feelings.
People grieve in many different fashions and in many different ways. You turn to your camera, you turn to creating, you turn to art, and what inside of you pushed you in that direction as opposed to pushing you somewhere else, pushing you into a period of non-creation?
Um, I am, I don't know what compelled me to really start taking photographs. Um, there was, I think it was really just in that week following that I started kind of seeing scenes all around me that kind of were ways to document that moment, but also ways to express how I felt. I mean, everyone's asking you how you're feeling, if you're doing okay. And I was feeling very overwhelmed by it. And I was like, I don't know how to put this into words. How do I say how I feel? How do I express this to people who don't understand, who've never been through this? And so I just started documenting things. And the first few images I made were actually very much documentary, I think. The very first image that I shot is actually in the show. It's called 12 Weeks, 6 Days, which is the point that I was at when I miscarried. It was this moment that I remember very clearly where I spent the night in the hospital, and I didn't come home until the afternoon, and I took a nap for a while because I don't really get a lot of sleep when you're in an emergency room for 8 hours. And so I'd kind of taken my first shower, and it was like this first kind of sigh of relief that it was kind of, I'd gone through the worst of it. And so I took that image in a way of documenting that moment. And then the image I took after that, I actually have omitted from the show at this point. It feels maybe a little too raw, a little too documentary for everything else, but it's an image of my stained bed sheets. Some people have seen it. It's I've shown it to people. It used to be on my website. I've just removed it since. I think maybe in some iteration in the future, it may live within the show in another way. Or if there was, maybe if I put these images into a book or something, it might live within that. But it just right now doesn't feel like it belongs with everything else, but it very much works with that image in front of the window.
And you have actually, in relation to that, as if even though we don't have that image and that wasn't included in the show,
Right.
you have a work titled New Bed Sheets.
Yeah.
Would that kind of serve as a compliment almost to that?
In a way, it correlates. For me, the act of changing those bed sheets out, which I waited a little while. I mean, I obviously washed the sheets, but I waited a while before I put brand new fresh sheets on the bed. And there was kind of like this ritual nature, like you're washing away this piece of you, this thing that happened. So when I went out and I bought new sheets, and I remember my partner Jake was like, "Are you sure you want to buy white sheets? Like, are you sure you don't want to get something else?" And I was like, "No, I need white sheets." And he's like, "Why do you need white sheets?" And then he came home a few days later and he's like, "There's a tripod in the bedroom. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I was photographing." And then I showed him these images. He's like, "So you bought new sheets so you could photograph them?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, it felt like, this kind of ritual, this kind of moment that needed to be documented." And so that's where that kind of came from.
Yeah, there's a lot of ritual that takes place, I think, in the bedroom. One of which is, just even making the bed in the morning, right? That's a ritual that some go through, and it can clear one's head. It can kind of symbolize a new and fresh start. Would you say that that's sort of like process of new bed sheets and fresh sheets is sort of a move towards a fresh start or a new start?
I think so. I mean, I think it was a way of clearing a part of my mind, right? Putting on new sheets meant we're getting rid of the old sheets, means that daily reminder, that thing I see on the sheet, that stain is gone. And I think there were lots of other little rituals in the process. The image that you mentioned in the beginning, 2 weeks later, of the wilted flowers, that image, so immediately following that first weekend, my dad and my stepmom came down just to make sure I was okay. And, they asked me if there was anything I wanted to do. I said I just wanted to go to the farmer's market on Saturday morning. And so I bought myself this bouquet and I kept it in the house. And that day that I photographed it was 2 weeks after I'd bought it. So it was kind of like 2 weeks since. And I'd left it, I don't know why, I just stopped watering it. And so I just let it kind of, decay. And the way that the flowers were decaying seemed so beautiful to me, that some were so perfectly intact, but just dried. And others were, completely falling over. So I moved it to a spot where there was a lot of light and I photographed it because I just felt like it housed so much. Like, I'm still intact, and from the outside, I think I still was seeming okay for the most part, but there were parts of me that I really felt like I was falling apart, and so it seemed to say all of that.
I kind of wanted to talk about the piece Things We Saved, which is what appears to be a very comfortable looking rocking chair of sorts.
Those are all items that my partner and I have both saved over the years. So the rocking chair is my grandmother's rocking chair that I was given after both of my grandparents had passed away. And so it's kind of been with me for a while. I've taken it from, apartment to apartment. It's moved to Columbus. It used to be in my studio at CCAD. It was in my studio at Millworks for a while when I was trying to really work in there. When we knew we were expecting, and everyone talks about getting a glider or a rocking chair for the nursery, I was like, well, we have one. I don't need anything else. So that's, I have that one. And then I'm a book collector. I'm kind of a book hoarder. So I have a ton of books, and there are some books that have traveled with me through the years and some I've picked up along the way. And then the Winnie the Pooh is something I have kept for 37 years. It's from when I was first born. It was my very first stuffed animal. Those are all pieces that were kind of really special to the two of us, that we were kind of saving and knowing that these are things that are going to be passed on to someone else. So the Things We Saved came from that. I was just kind of organizing them in a way that I thought kind of made sense or made a statement. In the gallery, the way that it's set up, there is also a shawl hanging over the back of the rocking chair. So in the installation. And that shawl was the beginnings of a blanket that someone was making for me, for us. So a coworker of Jake's wife was, like a coworker's wife, was making this baby blanket for us as soon as she found out that we were expecting. And I guess, I don't know a lot about this stuff, but I guess in the case of a miscarriage, they stop making the blanket. They kind of wrap it up there and then give it to you as a prayer shawl. So it's a prayer shawl that was made for us. And I felt like it was something really special from someone that I don't know. And I've just been holding on to it ever since. And it felt like the perfect place was to go with the other items in the gallery.
I'm looking at the contrast between about the size of an apricot, and that was 2018. And right next to it on our website is Collecting Seeds 2020. Mm-hmm. And it's actually amazing side by side to look at these two pieces. Your hands, and this is great. This is kind of almost giving me chills as you've talked about like how you're feeling in general about the whole experience has changed in 2 years. 2018, you're holding some apricots. There is a tenderness to the way that you're holding them. And then in this contrasting image, Collecting Seeds in 2020, the way that your hands are gripping the pomegranate, squeezing the pomegranate, pushing seeds out, there is sort of a frustration to it. Yeah. Intentional?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I would say that I had been trying to work with this pomegranate idea for a while. The day that I shot the orchid and the pomegranate together, I had also tried to make an image similar where I was ripping apart this pomegranate. And I really knew that that was an image that needed to be with the rest of the work, this ripping of the pomegranate, because I think a pomegranate traditionally is this kind of symbol of fertility because it's so packed full of seeds.
Mhm.
And when you're dealing with some issues of infertility, um, you just kind of like start to get really frustrated, and there are moments where you're really angry. And so I wanted this just ripping it apart. And the first image I made of it, I felt was just, it felt way too violent. Um, it was, I wanted the ripping of the seeds as they fell to the floor. And as pomegranate seeds fall to the floor and burst, and then you're standing in this puddle of red, I was like, that is just it's too much. And so I reshot in my dining room with the bowl kind of catching the seeds. And I thought it wasn't quite as violent feeling, but still held that same frustration.
Yeah, the frustration definitely. I feel that comes through. Well, Crystal, I wanted to talk a little bit about, the use of fruit that we see in your work. We talk about the symbolism, and honestly, this plays a little bit back into sort of traditional painting too, still lifes, and the use of pomegranate as a symbol of life. It's very fruitful. It's full of seeds. You use other types of fruit in your work too. And I know, having watched the opening with you, that the types of fruit used, they do symbolize something. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So kind of anybody who goes through a pregnancy nowadays, there's an app for, anything. And there are these pregnancy tracker apps that offer up kind of size comparisons every week of your pregnancy. And so the earliest ones are a poppy seed, and then it goes to a peppercorn. But those were so tiny that I stuck with, I started with a blueberry. So it's a blueberry, a raspberry, strawberry, pecan, kumquat, Brussels sprout, apricot. I think that's all.
Yeah, that looks like it.
I I had this idea with these because they were really fresh in my mind. I'd been watching them. At the point that I miscarried, I should have had something the size of an apricot. Apricots are really beautiful when they're photographed. They have a really beautiful color and surface, like small peaches. And so I really liked photographing those. But the other ones, I had this idea, I wanted all of them together to kind of symbolize this cycle. One of the problems I came up against is that not all of those fruit are available at the same time of year. The hardest thing for me to get in Ohio was a kumquat. They do not grow here. And their season is not the same as an apricot or anything else. So the closest thing I could find was at Whole Foods. It was a mandarin quat. And we had this, it's like a galvanized steel plate. It's meant for decoration. You're not supposed to eat off of it. I arranged them on there because I really liked the kind of cold metal against these things that we normally see as food, and kind of playing on the idea that they're not meant to be food in this scenario. I thought that would kind of be reminiscent of the cold kind of metal of objects and materials, tools that you would see in a doctor's office or a hospital.
The last two that I kind of want to talk about together, because they're presented together on the website, the photograph Empty from 2018 in relation to the photograph Every Last Drop, which was taken this year in 2020. They're both essentially photographs of vessels.
Yeah, I normally put Empty with about the size of an apricot to show kind of like a bountiful handful of things, and the symbolism of feeling kind of empty. I was going through so many different emotions at the time, and there was this realization that I could feel that empty space inside myself. That image was really hard to make. It's me in my underwear, and I'm normally not one to kind of bear so much of my own skin for any reason. Making that image was really kind of tough, but also empowering.
Your work's gorgeous, and I really appreciate you taking the time to really dive into your process with me, your feelings when creating these works. I'd like to ask you a few questions, kind of just about you as an artist and gallery spaces in general. What attracts you to a gallery space, or what makes you want to show in a particular space?
Um, I think that that is something that's really evolved over the years. I've gone from sometimes I'm applying to any and every show that I possibly can. It gets kind of exhausting at a point. So over the last couple of years, I've been really making a concerted effort to apply for more solo exhibitions or small group shows where um, more of my work can be showcased than maybe just one or two pieces. I have an appeal for the nonprofit galleries just because, as maybe comes across when I'm talking about how I make my work, I really do like to be in a lot of control. So I like to know that I'll be able to make some decisions about the layout, decisions about where things will be placed within a gallery. I generally do a lot of homework about a space before I apply to a show. One of the bigger hurdles I have right now is like thinking on a bigger kind of stage and thinking, okay, well, now what about outside of Ohio? What about across the country? What about possibly getting gallery representation? How do I maneuver those things? What kind of research do I need to do? And for anyone who's ever looked at a more commercial gallery and looked at their website, if someone is accepting portfolios, which is rare, they will often say that they want you to look through the artists they've represented and through their past exhibitions to make sure that your work kind of fits. And that can be really challenging. You obviously don't want to just like blindly start sending your work out. You might be sending it to a gallery that only represents a certain type of artist that you don't fit. And I also in part of my research is, like attending workshops and talks where people are talking about these types of relationships with galleries and relationships with curators. So that's kind of been my focus the last couple of years, is really trying to,
It's a whole bunch of great advice too that you just gave for emerging artists. Research, do your research and make sure that they're representing the sort of work that you want to see too, right?
Part of getting your work out there and applying to shows too, there's so much of a financial commitment to doing that. When you are first getting out there and you're applying to shows, you could apply to everything under the sun and spend thousands of dollars in submission fees and get one or two shows. And so, one of the things I used to always tell my students who are getting ready to graduate from CCAD was that, as you go out into the world, expect rejection. I would always say expect about 90 to 95% rejections. So know when you're going in, like I might apply to 5 shows and get into one, or I might get into none. And so am I okay with spending this much money on all of these submission fees, or should I scale back a little bit?
Do you ask your sort of your colleagues, your peers, your photography peers to review anything before you send it in? Like, do you ask them like, hey, can you review this set of images for me and make sure that it aligns with anything?
Sometimes I will. Sometimes I will ask for advice on sequencing. I mean, the worst thing you can possibly do is leave it up to chance and just let the images fall where they fall. So if they're in alphabetical order, that's not always the best sequence. So how do they work together well? So I will ask colleagues to kind of look at that and say, okay, does this piece make sense next to this piece?
Thank you everybody for tuning in, watching Crystal and I have a conversation. I wanted to encourage everyone to visit Crystal's site, crystaltursich.com. And then I'd like to also invite everybody to visit 934gallery.org, where you'll be able to find Crystal's show In Silence on our website, as well as her artist statement and artist bio. There's also an opportunity on our website to give. 934 Gallery is 100% volunteer run. Money that we get in through the gallery does not go to pay salaries. It keeps the gallery open, it keeps our lights on, and keeps a space in Columbus for all types of artists to come through and show work. So if you feel so inclined, visit the site and make a donation and keep us open. Thank you again, Crystal. It was a real pleasure for me to talk to you today. I hope to see you again in person at some point in the future at 934 Gallery. So take care, everybody.
Thanks for having me.